multiple firearms groups said it doesn't make any sense from day one. Now they've got more blowback from a source they really can't absorb much blowback from. Poly Remembers. That is a gun control group that was born out of the massacre at École Polytechnique in Montreal back in 1989, if you remember that. That's when a lot of the gun control launched in this country. They've been they're very, strongly in favor of gun control. But they even have decided that their support for the current gun buyback program that the Liberals are about to launch is not there. They're going to withdraw their support for this. They say there's some big loopholes in the program. It doesn't make any sense. The same loopholes that gun rights advocates have been talking about for a long, long time. So what's the problem here? Wes Winkel is president of the Canadian Sporting Arms and Ammunition Association. He joins us now. Wes, thanks for joining us. Appreciate your time.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
So yeah, Poly Remembers is talking about something that we've talked about before. This is not new, right? The government buys back a restricted gun. The owner then takes the money the government gave him and buys virtually an identical gun that for some reason is legal, right? That's the big problem here?
Well, that's, one of the things that Poly has an issue with, if you read their statements. And yes, there is. The problem is it goes back again, though, to the original prohibition. And Minister Blair, when he announced this prohibition, we shouted it from the rooftops right away. There was a big drastic change in the way policy is done with that prohibition. We've always done prohibitions in Canada based on mechanical definitions. Now, to be honest, a lot of those mechanical definitions are foolish, barrel length problems and stuff like that. But at the same time, at least it was mechanical and everyone understood what was prohibited and what's not. The problem with the Bill Blair's announcement in 2020 is that they were banning a style of firearm. Now, his terminology was assault style. But what that is, if you translate that means nothing. That means it's an arbitrary decision made by an arbitrary panel of what looks mean. And nobody knows what that means. Mm-hmm. And it also was done as a prohibition at what guns were available at that time. As soon as the guns get replaced by a modern make and model or a different one, now it's not listed on that list anymore. And nobody knows if that firearm is prohibited or not. So that's why you're seeing guns go to market now that bear a mechanical similarity or exact same mechanical firearm, identical in every way, but has a different model and is not prohibited by the prohibition in 2020 and therefore is sold at market. So that's what they're talking about, and we shouted it in 2020 when it happened, but Poly supported it because they have no real firearms knowledge at all, and they've had horrific things happen in their victims group, and we support what they do for victim services all over. But unfortunately, the problem was terrible policy when it was drafted. There was no conference with the industry at all, and there was no ability to correct it because they did it as a secret and wanted to make this grandiose announcement. But the media and the Canadian public should hold Minister Blair accountable for a terrible policy that was drafted in 2020.
Well, Wes, what they say and why they think they want to withdraw their support is the fact, like you say, I mean, the policy is a bit of a gong show, but they say it's just for show, right? I mean, it's not actually doing anything. It's so the government can say, look what we're doing, even though if you look a little deeper, really nothing is happening. It's all for show. Do you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. There's absolutely nothing happened. All these firearms are still in the exact same cabinets where they were in 2020. There's been no action on it since.
Yep.
And there's been, and again, there's been nothing happen with these firearms because they weren't a public safety hazard to start with. They're all in licensed people's hands. So everyone acknowledges now we are 4 years down the road. There's been no incidents with them. There was never a public safety concern there at all. But yet it was just done by Minister Blair to try to get votes. And it was a facade right from day one.
Is there anything worthwhile in the program, Wes? I mean, is it salvageable? Is there something in there that you look at and say, okay, that makes sense?
Well, no, and we mentioned it right from the start, is that the concept in a rural country like Canada of going around collecting these firearms and destroying them in a cost-effective manner just is not possible. There's no real way to do it, and I feel very sorry for the bureaucrats that have been tasked with this venture by Minister Blair, because even though he said he did his research and it was doable back in 2020, I think at this point, 4 years down the road, it's quite clear it was a lie. And now we are in a situation where these bureaucrats have tried everything to get it put together, but there's so many roadblocks in the way as far as carrier issues and and willing business partner issues that it really is not a doable thing. And now Pauly is so frustrated with the lack of action that they're pulling their support.
Yeah.
And there's just no allies left because, again, Minister Blair made such a huge mistake in 2020.
Hey, Wes, I know you're involved in the sale of guns. Have you seen instances, and you don't have to name names, just tell me if this happens, like have gun manufacturers said, okay, well, this is an easy thing. We'll just change the name of it, or we'll tweak this tiny little thing. Basically, it's the exact same gun we've always sold, but let's get it off that banned list by doing the least thing we can do, and we'll just keep selling. Has that happened?
In some circumstances, with Canadian manufacturers, yes.
Okay.
But from foreign manufacturing, not so much, just because Canada's market is so small
yeah.
on the foreign scale that they really don't make decisions based on our market at all. We kind of have to react as to buyers of what becomes available. And if we think that the changes have been significant enough to get them off the list, we go for them.
Gotcha. Okay. Thanks, Wes. Appreciate it.
No problem at all. Thank you.
You bet. Wes Winkel, president of the Canadian Sporting Arms and Ammunition Association. And I mean, like I said before, when it comes to gun control in Canada around this issue, I think we're reacting to what happens in the United States. And these rules that are being brought in, and I know there was the massacre in Nova Scotia. Don't get me wrong. I'm not overlooking the fact that we do have gun violence in Canada, but I think the gun control that we have in Canada is pretty adequate. And I think it's actually held up as a model in a lot of places around the world. Like we don't know that we need to be doing major overhauls and doing a lot of changes. I think we're pretty good. Like I say, illegal handguns and stuff like that, that's a different issue to me. That's a problem, big problem. But this AR-15 conversation and that sort of thing, I think it's direct response to what we see happening in the United States. The United States has a massive gun control problem. We don't, I don't think. Maybe I'm wrong. I've never fired a gun. I never will. I'm not a gun guy. But we don't have the same gun violence, so whatever we're doing seems to be working. But this program that was bought in, and we've documented a long list of Liberal government announcements that never actually turn into policy, right? And that's what this strikes me as. It is so simplistic.